Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Cryptid Master KD coming at you with part 2 of Heaven's Gate. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. We talked about how the cult founders T and Do met and what led to them creating Heaven's Gate. Now, this part is focused on the beliefs and the downfall of Heaven's Gate. Now, after the events I mentioned in the previous video about how they met and how, their sci-fi pitch, well, what happened next? The story that goes is that after leaving their families, Marshall Applewhite, also known as Herf, and his co-worker Bonnie Lou Nettles, who was pretty much the interpreted spiritual writer of the entire Heaven's Gate, they set out on what is known as a spiritual road trip. Right. And just to go out into the world and spread the knowledge and the sacred word of Marshall Applewhite. During this time, while Bonnie Nettles left her children behind with her ex-husband, she wrote to her daughter Terry Nettles regularly, and Terry Nettles actually made an appearance on a few documentaries of this very event. One of which read like this: July 1975. We have come out of the wilderness, and we know what our mission is. It's the same true as John's revelations. I'm not kidding. It's for real. That was a script from what she wrote to her daughter Terry. Now, along the way of this great spiritual journey of theirs, they had financial difficulties, and Applewhite ended up arrested for stealing a rental car, or for whatever reason is unknown. But during his 6 months jail sentence of this time, he fine-tuned his doctrine, read his sacred Bible of the big-brained alien people. So, upon Applewhite's release, the two of them contacted a local UFO researcher named Hayden Hughes in hope of spreading their message. The message of Applewhite. And according to Hayden Hughes, this is what Applewhite said to them. He said, Hayden, if you ever want to get a hold of me. One thing that Marshall Applewhite taught was the fact that he could communicate with people telepathically through even codes of thought. And that's what he said to Nathan Hughes. That, he said to him, if you ever need to get a hold of me, he gave him a sacred code, which was mentally praying to Bonnie and Herf with the Lord's Prayer. And then about 6 weeks later, there was a wide publicity about some people that went missing and disappeared in Oregon. And that's pretty much what happened. happened because Hayden contact pretty much, decided to use the code and recited the prayer. And the next morning, he receives a telephone call, and when Herb Applewhite said, "You have now asked," well, he said that maybe they are who they say they are. Now, the identity of the cult in this time was known as human individual metamorphosis. Yes. Which led to their beliefs. Basically, the entire storyboard of the cult's ultimate goal here was that they would go through metamorphosis and go to what's called a level above human. They compared themselves as the two, based on the two witnesses in the book of Revelations, who were slain and then ascended into heaven at the end of days. And, well, that's pretty much how they declared themselves. They went to churches and other parts, radio stations, all to spread the word that they were the two, even on several ends, proving that they were the two. Ew. And human individual metamorphosis became a very popular gathering for the fading hippie counterculture. In 1977, by the year 1977, the group had about 30 people. But a year, they would, and the main teachings of their cult is that, well, you had to follow the teachings of Marshall Applewhite, White and Bonnie. So, allow me to show you. Number one, attend the social gathering and follow the two. Doe and T. He. A big thing of this was the notion that the members of this group would struggle to be like angels, denying their sexuality desires as well as their individual desires. Now, as you just saw, that's number one, to attend the meetings of Marshall Applewhite. And this is the main goal teachings here. Listen to them. And here are the rules of Heaven's Gate that all members were required to. And that's number one, follow the rules. Rules meaning cut off all contact with your families and friends. Give up everything you possess. Follow the word of the teacher, and then shun your desires and follow the path to the big aliens. And then last but not least, later on, cut your manhood parts off. Cut your nuts off. That was the big thing of Heaven's Gate. But most of that didn't come until later on. But the primary of the whole belief of them is that through all the teachings of Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, that you would go basically through metamorphosis, and you'll end up something like this here, and you will become what they knew as level above humans. Means that their life here would go through a metamorphosis, and they would evolve quickly into a level above human. This is what you would end up as level above human. And this is what would lead later on to the downfall of Heaven's Gate. But the point is that this was the first-hand teaching of the doctrine. That, like all of you saw, you follow the teachings of Marshall Applewhite. Now, to get people to understand who Marshall was, is that basically he was, according to his sci-fi novel, is that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. The typical cult thing. The typical cult's teachings. That he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Right. That the same spirit, alien spirit that was in Jesus Christ, was now in him. And so once all that was achieved here, that once you have completed your mission, that when the time came, that a UFO would officially come down and scoop you up and board the flying saucer, or it would take you into eternity. All that said, now you understand the cult's beliefs and main goal. Now back to the topic here. In the last few years after that event, Marshall Applewhite began turning not just their religious beliefs, their UFO cult, into a religion, but into a business as well. And to keep all this going, they pretty much got a few hundred followers, which is more than I get every year. But you know what? I want to try something here. How about we all take a moment and telepathically try to pray to Bigfoot? Okay, go. Okay, nothing's happening. Wait, I'm getting a message. He says you need to like, comment, and subscribe and share. Here, that's the holy commandment of Bigfoot. Okay, back to the topic. I'm done messing around. So, in some way, there was one time when they actually told the people, their followers, that the UFO was coming. The UFO is coming. Now, many of the members of the cult were members of the fading hippie countercultures. Like, most of the members were also, were kind of spiritualists themselves. Transcendental meditation, all the religious stuff. And so And they found this tempting, so they followed the leader during the cult, just like in the apostolic age. This was Peter and John. Like all of these people were Peter, John, according to the Bible. Peter, John, Matthew, Michael, all of those others, simply putting everything aside and following the teacher. That's what we got here. Here. And to keep the business going, you see, members would sell blood at blood banks. And as for contributions and from local churches and all that con artist stuff. And then many wealthy members gave their trust funds to the group. By the fall of within the next year, they were making $400,000 a year. With this income, they brought in new followers, new members. Even the wealthy members gave their trust fund to the group. Now, if this doesn't sound like a scam to you, it's a scam. Come on. Many of them went homeless for a while, as all trusted to the teachings for the mission. And that's what they did. So basically it was like how Jesus fasted. You can understand the sci-fi pitch to this whole thing. Now, not too long after all that, Marshall and Bonnie gathered a small group of people into the woods, living on what they called good energy spots. Like places like Colorado. And California and other parts like that. What they called the good energy. And in one of these spots, Marshall and Bonnie took some people out into the forest to make camp, and they told them the UFO was coming. So the people, all of them trusting him, waited there all night. Nothing happened, and they were waiting and waiting. And so Bonnie and Herf came out and said, "You passed the test. This was the test of your faith." Normal stuff. Now, none of the members were caged in this kind of cult. They were always allowed to lead. But by the early 80s, cracks were starting to fall in the hands of the cult, which was now being called Heaven's Gate. The many longtime members pretty much became confused and quit. And at this time, young Terry Nettles, you can even look her up on the net, but she says, this is when the letters she was getting kind of darker and darker. Like she was getting messages like, conform to society, follow all the rules and so on. So basically she was losing faith and that she no longer believed this was real. Now the cults believed, as I mentioned earlier, that they were going to be slain and sent into heaven. Basically, that death could overcome like Jesus did 2,000 years ago. But all this came crashing down when in 1984, whore, Bonnie Lou Nettles, was diagnosed with brain cancer. Now, admitted into a hospital under an assumed name, she would die alone in her native state of Texas. It's a real tragedy, yet how... Now, the really messed up of this whole thing was the fact that Applewhite never informed Bonnie's children of her passing or death, of her illness or her death, until several months later. Now, on many shows and documentaries I've seen, this really struck Terry Nettles hard. You know, you can only imagine your mom started this whole UFO thing, and you, from your young childhood times, dreamed of the UFO thing. You really look up to this, and then you find out your mom died horribly. That your mom had died, and you were never there to be with her on her last moments. It's really messed up. But Marshall was devastatedly shocked by the whole thing. You know, Marshall would go on to lead without his beloved Bonnie Nettles. Doe, as he was called now, like T and Doe in the musical number, he was shaken by T's death. But not just him. It really struck a lot of the followers in this. Like, how could this be? You know, she was supposed to would be remade and ascend into heaven. It put a lot of the whole things that the followers were taught here to the test. And like, was this thing real or was it a con game? Because the main question they would all ask is, how could a messenger of God die and her body remain on Earth? Marshall had to remake his doctrine. That it's complicated to get into. That her old vehicle, that's when they began saying that their bodies were vehicles, that they could abandon them at any time. Like, this is when the whole thing starts to unravel here. When Marshall's teaching said that you could ascend this spiritual translation by other means, that taking your own life was an option, that all of this was an option. And it's crazy enough that a lot of these followers didn't even think about leaving. If it were me right there, I would just up and leave and say goodbye. Now, Marshall would be very off from this point on. By the 90s, one thing came out that would pretty much work on this kind of thing. The global internet. And he used this to spread his gospel to the outside world. Not good feedbacks, but he would spread his message through the outside world. at this time they rented a mansion, and in Santa Fe, California. Yeah, and basically, that everybody needed to be ready when the alien spaceships would come. But this would eventually go very extreme to the police. You see, Marshall very was very having a hard time with his love life sexuality. And basically, he was with some of the cult members, it became clear that he was gay. Which but he didn't want to be that way, but sorry, Marshall, that's not how it works. But he even struggled with to maintain his role as the all powerful leader. He has cited rules and stuff, but in the past, he had struggled with the members. He had distanced himself in that time to avoid his homosexual urges. And that, even one time I heard that he actually went to one of the members and said to him point blank that, my vehicle is being attracted to your vehicle. God, that's messed up. So you need to leave. And this was devastating, but the guy left no problem. The details of the whole thing you're going to have to look up for yourself. I don't want to get demonetized, even though I'm not monetized. It's because the word of Cryptid Master, it needs to get out. But that's when he asked the men of the group to join him in castration. Because he was hard time with his early life, so he actually entertained castrating himself. One man, Michael Commerce, a 13-year member, when he heard about this, he went like, whoa, okay, I can't do this. Which was, Michael, you're very smart. Very well done. That's when I would just say, quit. I'm out. I'm not doing this. This is completely bonkers. But 13 men, but Applewhite and 13 male members, they did. There was a woman who was a nurse, and she tried the procedure, and it just got messy. And all that. So, 13 members of the group, male members, and Marshall Applewhite flew to Mexico City and were surgically castrated. And now, all this said and done, this event would lead to the next event. And would lead up to the tragedy that would happen. And now this is going to get, a warning on there, so be prepared. But a great event happened that would lead to the horrible worst fate of Heaven's Gate. There were a lot of rules back then. But the event that would seal the fate of the entire group in 1997, then the group Applewhite would come to hear of something important. In 1997, the comet Hale-Bopp was passing in 1997. The comet Hale-Bopp was passing through Earth's orbit. For its first visit in over 2,000 years. And this is what would transpire for the most terrible event in United States cult history. Marshall heard about the comet. Now Marshall would go on this is when Marshall Applewhite would say, "This is it. It's the sign we've been waiting for the spaceship from the level above human to take us home to the literal heavens." Now, a couple members have already quit, but this was what they all prepared for. It's time to go. It's time to go into heaven. It's time to go to the spaceship with the big aliens and stuff. Now, one of the main people who would come out and report what had happened was none other than a former member, Rio D'Angelo. He was the first to discover what happened. In March 1997, Evan, when the cult members made exit videos that you can look them up for yourself, but they are completely spine-chilling. So, that is when, Rio D'Angelo was a long-time member, but he felt something was pulling him away, and he finally went on to do another career. So, and he was the first, he would receive a letter from the cult saying, "We have ascended. We have exited our vehicles." And they left him some money. But then the tragedy happened. He pretty much figured out this was not right. So he returned to the Heaven's Gate mansion. And the door was open and that's when he found it. 39 bodies were found in Rancho Santa Fe, California. Yeah, and basically, former members would come to hear about this. Basically, the group, according to the records, say that they had taken phenobarbital and alcohol, which is something that you shouldn't. What was eerie about this was the way they were, completely set up. And you can look that up too. How the cult's bodies were completely in the same fashion. But when the bodies were found, it was terrible. But what had happened? 39 bodies. These were found. And a lot of the former members, like Chuck Humphrey and Rio, said even after all the feeling that their friends had died, they were still believers. That they didn't die in vain. They went up to the next level. They had exited, in the immortal words of I can even play a recording here for all of you so that you can completely understand. And that this was completely bonkers.
I was so happy to leaving this atmosphere in preparation for its recycling. They had exited their vehicles in much the same way that they had entered them. I was so happy to hear that they were finally off this planet, that they finally got out of those vehicles. And I just wished that I was with them at that moment.
Really? So you thought you want to be dead and go with them? So even to this day, Rio D'Angelo is still a believer that his friends are up at the next level. But a few months later, this man who you heard the recording tried to take his life, but they managed to save him. Police managed to save him. It was really, really... Now, this whole thing would completely wipe out the cult. But what was the really meaning of Heaven's Gate before we close up this video? Well, it's basically the dream of completely seeing a UFO. It was about a UFO joining a group, but the promise of a UFO taking this group to a better world where we could live better and our lives would be better, live forever, and completely live in a society that our unstable world lacks. But the point is that now early on, a reporting Christian bookstore man named Hank Hanegraaff asked the same thing. He saw Heaven's Gate as a massive spiritual con man, which is coming more recent in these days, but that was the point. So often they would follow a leader who is presenting themselves with skin of the truth with a deadly lie. No one could say that better than Herb Applewhite. And they followed his teachings to their deaths. But why? Well, according to him, people are looking for God in all the wrong places. And that's pretty much what's happening in recent years when it comes to this. You know, it's all human nature. That's what we understand. That that people are spiritually hungry, and we feel Christianity's failed us. So we replace God's enduring word with a UFO or an extraterrestrial and all that and everything's going to be perfect. Now there is another cult if you want me to that I can share in the next video, another video, unless you want me to get back to my cryptids. In fact, before we wrap up, the last thing I can say to all of you is, all of you who right now who want to join the cryptid cult of Master KD, all you have to do is like, comment, and subscribe, and join me, and join the club, join this cult into a cult, and help spread the knowledge that the great cryptid master KD, possesses. So, with that all out of the way, guys, I really hope you guys enjoyed this lovely 8-hour-long heading, and I hope you guys enjoyed the vehicle. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let's build this channel to glory this year. That's what we're going to be doing. And please join the channel, and if you want to, you can just hit the channel. I will be releasing some edited videos very, very soon. I'll be... Oh my... There is the worst thing, a skinwalker kitty outside. Oh boy. So, join the channel, like, comment, subscribe. You all know what to do, so without further ado, I'm Cryptid Master Kitty. Peace out! How? Fist pump.